Welcome everyone, and thank you very much for making time to attend our community information meeting. My name's Anita Martin. I'm the coordinator of the Citizens for Better Environment Lake Mills Environmental Group. It's a grassroots group, and we're hosting this as a group of volunteers tonight. We'd like to recognize a few people here tonight. First of all, we have somewhere Officer Witt with the police department. Thank you for being here. We have city leaders. I think we have some city leaders. Do we have some city leaders? We do not. But we have Lee Peterson as on the town board. We also have Dave Schrader on the town board. Ed Morse, who is our City of Lake Mills County Board Supervisor. We have here videographer Damon Tracy, who is graciously taping for tonight. And I think that might be everybody. So thank you again, and we also would like to recognize and thank the volunteers that helped deliver flyers for this event, and Mike and Sherry Hellickson for covering advertising costs for our forum tonight. Special thanks to Daybreak Foods management team for their willingness to attend, participate, and present their plans. We recognize this is not an easy thing for a number of reasons. As folks are coming in, I wanted to make sure, does everybody have an agenda for tonight? Okay, and an information sheet to fill out. Did everybody get the 2 sheets? Okay, very good. So we're going to do our best to keep on schedule so we have lots of time for questions and comments. Please hold your questions until we start the question and answer period, which will be about 7 o'clock, so we can get as many people, give as many people a chance to speak as possible. We're hoping the Daybreak team will be able to stay until 8:30 to answer questions and hear what everyone has to say. So first up is Daybreak Foods. They'll introduce themselves, they'll do a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll quickly go over the rules and start the question and answers. Okay, got the lights, very good. Okay.
Thank you, Anita, for having us, hosting us, and the Community for a Better Environment. Appreciate we've met with Anita and her team on multiple occasions over the last year and a half, and really once we understood what we were doing, we've been trying to involve more people in the community to get a better understanding of some of our plans. So, introduction: I'm Bobby Harris, Rick Radel, and Keith Kulo. So. Rick and I will be presenting tonight. So really we're going to cover 2 main topics. We're not going to go over a lot of the site details because that's been done at the town hall meetings. Really what we're going to concentrate our brief presentation on tonight is really odor mitigation. How do we reduce the odor that comes from a live agricultural poultry farm? So number 1 up there, it says, why Wisconsin and why cage-free? That has come up a couple of times. I'll briefly address this now. We've been asked by our customers to switch to cage-free with a portion of our birds. So we have 9 farms across 4 states, and we have 3 phases that will switch some of our birds to cage-free. It represents a smaller portion of our business, but nonetheless it was a request by our customers, and we're fulfilling that request. And one of the opportunities that we had is to choose where. And so we're doing this at 3 different locations. And so why Wisconsin? And probably the biggest reason why is what we call the Creekwood Farms. It's our oldest facility. It's one of the older facilities in the United States from what we've been told. Some of the first barns that were erected there were, I've been told, 1968. Most of them coming in the early 1970s. So it's lived a long life. It's had 3 owners. We're the 3rd owner. And when we had to choose where to do this new cage-free sites, and again there'll be 3 of them, Wisconsin came up as not only one of the sites, but it actually came up as our first site. There's a couple other reasons why we chose it to be first and not last. A, the age of the farm, and B, why we're here today. We know that the farm is older. We know that we are a bit constricted to some of the things that we'd like to do with odor mitigation, just due to the fact of the farm's age and some of the ventilation systems that were, fine at the time in the 70s, but clearly you wouldn't build that today. So that's why Wisconsin, that's why cage-free. Cage-free still makes up a very small majority of all the eggs in the United States, but a lot of the restaurant-type businesses are going cage-free. A lot of them have made declaration statements by 2025, and so we're fulfilling a customer demand there. So Rick, could you explain what we're doing with our current odor mitigation and things to come?
Thank you, Bobby. Again, thanks for inviting us here. I've had the opportunity to give a couple presentations at some either a town board meeting or at a town plan commission meeting, and I'm sure I'll do more as this goes along. But what I'd like to talk about for just a few minutes is some of the things that we have implemented or are implementing to deal with the current situations that we have on the farm. So improving our odor reduction practices really starts with the chance that we had the opportunity to take over the composting process. When we acquired the farm back in 2008, it came with a hitch. And the hitch was that there was a company involved with the farm at that time on contract to take care of all the compost and manure that was produced at the farm. We learned fairly early on that they weren't doing the greatest of jobs, and it clearly was affecting everybody, including us. Okay, so that was essentially a 10-year contract, and we worked hard to get ourselves out of that contract, and finally did basically in 2016. So we saved a couple of years off of that. In that process, the first thing we knew we had to do was get the right equipment. So some of you have maybe heard we've been purchasing some good equipment to do a better job and a more consistent job at composting. This particular piece of equipment that you see is used inside the compost buildings and gives us a much better and consistent compost turn at the times we need to do it. Now, we'll be the first to admit, we're learning as we go. We only have a couple farms that do this type of composting, so we're working to implement our best practices. When we bought this piece of equipment, sometimes you think you spend $500,000 and life's going to be better. Well, it will be better once you figure out how best to use it. And so as we started using the equipment, we're now learning what works best. And one of the things I'll speak of here shortly is just how often you turn the product, because every time you turn compost, and if you have even a small composter at home, every time you turn it, it wants to gas off, which is a good thing because that's part of the process of composting, but it also creates odors. The second thing that we're doing, and I'm going to say it this way, we have been listening. At a recent meeting at the town hall, people were concerned that were some of the odors coming from mortality. And it is a common practice in the industry, in our business, and in most for that matter, that the mortality that takes natural place on the site would be composted into that manure. The challenge we have, though, is wetter manure makes composting of mortality much more difficult and, quite honestly, can be a little stinkier. Okay? So we investigated after hearing those concerns on what our options were, and we've elected to go with the two-stage cremator. Now, what that is a two-stage burner where it gets loaded up with any mortality from a given day, and then the second stage of that actually reburns off at about 1,300 degrees the exhaust from that cremator, so by the time anything emitting out of the stack, there are no odors or smoke, and everything's been burned off. So it's a more expensive way to do it. Obviously, it uses a little more energy, but we're trying to solve a larger problem, so we figured we had to go to the next step. Bird nutrition is something fairly recent for us, and our nutritionist for Daybreak Foods has worked with us, and we actually are doing some diet supplementation that actually helps the bird just really have a less moisture level in their manure. And so we've applied that at one of our other sites to test it. It worked very well, and now we're applying it here. You know, it takes a little while for that to get into the bird's digestive system, but once it does, it will play another role to reduce the moisture level in the manure. And really, at the end of the day, composting and best practices are really most important because it's what we do. In other words, if we get everything as far as equipment and layout of a site and whatever it might be correctly, but if we don't operate it correctly, then the onus is on us. So the things that we feel that we're working on now and that we have been working on is we have found that the best thing we can do is remove the manure from the houses. Now, I'm talking the current houses, about every 4 days, okay? And actually, not 3, not 5, but 4. And we found that as best practices at other sites that we have because it then reduces the amount of gas off, and you actually take advantage of some of the time in the house to reduce that moisture level and let it naturally evaporate. We also are adding wood chips to the dry manure. And that has a significant advantage because when the bird, the moisture level of manure is about 75%. And so that's what we're starting with. In our new facility, it won't be like that at all. But in this facility, it is. And that's just the way it is. So the best thing we can do is do just small steps along the way to reduce that before we get to the compost process. So by adding in the wood chips, that's actually a carbon source for the compost process. We want to turn that compost as little as possible. Remember I showed you that big machine? Well, you know, the more that we turn it, the more it can smell. And there's value in not turning it that much. So our practices now will be to turn it as little as possible. In fact, we're going to make sure we turn it only Monday through Wednesdays. Why? Well, because there's a good chance that our closest neighbors would rather we don't turn it on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's just the way it is. And we're cognizant of that, and we can control it. And quite honestly, it'll actually work better for us. So it's kind of a win-win all the way around. And as you can see, when it comes to hauling the product off-site, we're going to follow the same practices. Because once you take a loader and you take a scoop of the compost, you might as well be turning it. So the idea is, let's do the same thing, follow best practices for loading, and that's what we'll do. But the most important thing is our improved results. Now, I'm sure some of you would say, what improved results? But I can tell you, when you look back at the frequency and the severity of the complaints over time, they have dropped significantly. We've made some serious inroads lately in the last year because we've gotten to take over the composting process. Is it perfect? Far from it. Is it where we want it to be? Far from it. That's why we're going to continue to do what we do. But we feel that if we don't do these steps now, it's going to affect you that by the time we want to build the new site, and that construction would start soon, we want you to know that we're already working towards a better environment for you. Bobby?
I'm going to briefly just go over what the new site will look like. Some of you have seen it that have been at the town hall meetings, and some of you have not. So, talk about our future farm. First, let me go over the location. So, basically, this is the town of Lake Mills up by the red laser, right up there. This is Crossman Road. The bottom of the screen would be south, north, west, and east. Our current farm is right here. And let me go over briefly what we'll be expanding. Our future farm is going to be across our current farm on Crossman Road. It will consist of 5 layer buildings. There's 2 flocks per building, so it'll be 10 flocks. And in our business, a flock is a set of birds raised at the same time, so they're the same age. Back here, this is a manure storage building, which we're able to compost in. One significant difference already that you can see, or likely see, is these layer houses are connected to the manure storage building. Our current farm that we purchased in 2008, the layer buildings are separate from the manure storage buildings, which means that we have to haul the manure, you know, via basically truck and trailer to the layer facility, again, open to the environment. So that's a new And then this is this would be our new processing plant right here. Currently that is located in the corner of County A and Crossman. And this is the proposed new site for the feed mill. Ideally, we'd like to have the feed conveyed automatically to these farms to reduce the truck traffic that happens with feed milling. And then right here, these would be the locations of the new pullet houses. A pullet is basically a day-old bird until roughly 17 weeks. That's what they call a pullet. She's not laying an egg at that period of her life. And so we raise them here, and they get moved to a layer facility. You never want these two to be adjoined because of bird health issues. Everywhere across the U.S. and Europe, you always separate your pullet buildings from your layer buildings. And then this is an existing pullet building. It's actually not, it's the newer of the three, and then these two get destroyed. So these two come down. All 9 of our current layer barns get taken down. They will no longer be there. So these 9 go away. These 2 pullet buildings go away, and then the new layers, new manure storage building, processing, feed mill, and pullets. So that is a look at the new site, and I'll briefly go over a couple of details on here. This is an artist rendition of the layer facility. It's going to be pretty close to what we're going to have. It's not perfect, but it's close. One of the things I wanted to point out to everybody here is it's a lot different than what we have today. What you see here in the center, and I'll get to this in a second, this is where we dry the manure, in the center of each of these buildings. And in the back here, you see a long perpendicular green block structure. That is the manure facility where we do composting. Okay. So our future farm technology and design. So what's going to be different about a farm that we're going to build here in the near future versus what was built in 1968, 1970? Well, one of the things that will be different at the pullet barn, okay, at the pullet facility, this is a brief look inside. So the birds are housed in these structures, and the yellow arrows represent the manure belt. So when the birds are running around or whatever, when they have droppings, they'll fall onto manure belts. The manure belts will have blowers on them, and the blowers allow the manure to rapidly dry, and it creates what they call a crust around the manure crumble. That's really important. If there's one thing I could take away, or would hope that a lot of people take away, moisture and manure equals odor. So the more I can reduce the moisture more rapidly, the less odor that the manure has. And so our whole design of the new farm is to rapidly remove moisture. So at our pullet facility, this is what we're doing here to dry the manure in the belt. And then you'll notice a small structure here. Today, we remove manure and it's exposed to the outdoors as we do it just because of the age of the assets. Okay? With this one, this will pull in, the manure will get loaded onto a trailer, covered, and then transported under the cover of a trailer. So again, not exposed to the outside. It's good not only for the birds, but mitigating dust and so forth is important. I failed to comment too on the prior one that one of the other design features that we're doing is we are going to put hard surface roads around our barns, again, to mitigate the dust that's created with farming activities on a poultry farm. So this is a look inside of our layer building. A layer, again, is a mature hen. She's laying eggs. So when I say layer, that's what I mean. And so inside here, again, we're going to employ the same manure belt drying system. That takes manure from 75% moisture down to 45%, roughly. There are some seasonal differences, with humidity levels and so forth outside, but that is a rough average of what we can anticipate. This is not new technology, but it's new for us and will certainly be new to this facility here. So you're already taking roughly 30% of the moisture before it even leaves the bird area, and you're drying that. It encapsulates that moisture inside that manure crumble. That's a big odor mitigation step. The other thing, and this is just simply pointing to the dryers that allow that to happen. The other thing that I wanted to point out, One of the differences in raising a cage-free bird is the bird now has no less than 1 square foot per bird as far as its density unit. Conventional birds have roughly 67 square inches. So we're giving the birds 2 times the room inside of our laying house. Why that's important for odor is the manure also has 2 times the space to have air pass over it and around it. Again, more rapid drying, more ability to encapsulate the manure crumble, therefore mitigating the odor. Really important. It's one of the advantages of being cage-free. So even though we have more birds on site after it's all done, we've sized the system on a per bird basis to assure that we have the proper rapid manure drying. The second technology improvement that's vastly different than today is, I told you before that in the center of these buildings is where the manure is dried, and I'm not talking about the manure belt dryer. This is actually where the manure is now taken away via conveyor into the center of the building. The manure travels in serpentines through a belt system, what they call a manure drying system, or an MDS. There are many in Europe. There's now many been purchased in the United States. And what that does is it takes manure down to less than 20% moisture content. So again, as a reminder, today manure gets moved to our manure storage building just because of the age of the assets and the age and how they're, how the farm is built at 75%. So that's what we deal with at our current manure storage building, is a moisture content of 75%. With these 2 steps of rapid manure drying, they will move into a manure storage facility at 20% or less. That's a 3-fold reduction versus what we have today and what's been there probably for a long time since it's been built. Oh.
We're just trying to keep on.
Okay. The other big thing that I want to point out, instead of the barn exhausting to the outside like it does today, that was very common, all of the barn exhaust goes to the center of the building. So there won't be any exhaust directly from the birds going to the outside. It goes to the center where it pressurizes this chamber and allows the manure to dry. That's a big deal. From here, the manure travels through this corridor, all under roof, and into our manure storage building. And inside the manure storage building, at the very end, we plan to install a filter media that has a corona wire. Basically, it's an electrically charged wire, and it creates like a magnetic effect, so it gloms the dust together and it falls on a mat. We did this test successfully in Northwest Iowa with Iowa State University, and it takes out over 70% of the particulate matter that would normally go through that area. So we've already tested it, and we're pretty pleased with the results. And with that, I'm done. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, before we go on to questions and answers and comments, we'll just review our communication rules for everyone to follow today. Please be respectful. By that we mean no yelling, screaming, swearing, and no dancing on the ceiling. Let's all be courteous to each other. We're a room full of individuals with many different backgrounds, experiences, and viewpoints. We can agree to disagree if necessary without putting each other down.
Comment card if you have any comments, and if you want to ask a question.
Please maintain a quiet atmosphere, so if anyone does have a phone, cell phone on, you might want to turn it off at this time or silence it, please. Be sure that if you would like to identify yourself before speaking, that you do so, and people can choose to speak anonymously. Throughout the course of the evening, the farm team may decide to pass on answering some questions, which is their option. We sincerely hope, however, that they answer most, if not all, of the questions folks ask. So some people took numbers, and we'll go ahead and start with those who have numbers, and we've also had some people submit questions that were not able to be here. So our timekeeper tonight is Mike Hellickson, and we each have 2 minutes to pose questions. Sherry Hellickson will be giving the sign when time is up to keep us all on track, and Ronnie Monroe will be manning or womaning the microphone within the audience. And Ronnie is one of our members, a longtime member of our Citizens for Better Environment Lake Mills group, and she's an RN with a public health background. So without further ado, we have speaker number 1 that would like to speak.
Just raise your hand. So I can...
Okay.
Hi, Jerry Grzinski, Lake Mills. Just a couple of questions. What's the cremator? Is that, it looked like you got it on Tuesday? You got that thing fired up? Does it work?
We're installing it over the next 2 weeks.
Okay. Then what's the timeline on that, on your building? What are you thinking? When are you going to do the tear down? When are you going to start construction?
Sure. So right now we have planned construction based on the permitting process that we would start. Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. Okay, so we would actually start moving earth. Probably start at the pullet site first, because as you can imagine, we would want to start building pullet barns, because as the layer barns are built, we will fill the layer barns with birds. So to do that, first we have to start raising the pullets. So we would start moving earth on the pullet site about the 15th of April. That's our targeted date.
That existing building that
I'm sorry, yeah, of 2018.
That existing building that you illustrated, is there one in the country that you went to see?
There are similar buildings. Jerry, one of the things that we have been told, though, is, and again, this is from our vendor community, that the manure drying system, a lot of people have purchased that. A lot of people have purchased the manure belt dryers, but our vendors have told us they're not aware of anyone purchasing both together, because we've been told that's a bit overkill. But that being said, that's what we're doing. So that did change a little bit the barn design. But yes, there are barn designs very similar to this, maybe not as robust as this one, but similar.
And they did eliminate that odor.
I was very impressed when I visited these farms.
Okay. It seems that, you're doing your homework and trying to eliminate the biggest thing that we have here in Lake Mills that I see, I guess, is the odor, and you're aware of that. You didn't mention water and wells. What's up with the wells and the manure spreading and so on and so forth with that?
So as far as wells go, we will have high-capacity wells on the site. We started the application process for that already. That's done with the DNR. We plan to have 4 high-capacity wells on the layer site and 3 on the pullet site. But the wells that service the layer site will also service the processing plant. And we would start construction of those wells, about the same time that we would actually start building construction. Now, when it comes to, say, land application of anything, one of the things I think that's important to note is the agreement that we have for our manure that's taken off-site that we have contract for companies like Midwest Bioway. Part of that agreement is to not spread it in the township of Lake Mills. It's actually a clause in the contract. And we would always honor that as we proceed forward with additional contracts. I can tell you, and I think it's kind of important, there's kind of a value added. Once we do all of this for the manure, make it that dry, it also makes it a more valuable product. And so, people that buy it are liking that because now they have something that's more saleable. It can be taken further out, right, because it's drier and easier to haul. When it comes to wastewater distribution, we use a nutrient management plan for that. Again, we do not spread on our own land. We don't spread around wells. Any type of nutrient management plan, whether it's for manure or processed wastewater, whatever it might be, there are strict setbacks from wells, from different types of land, different weather, whether it's snow-covered, not snow-covered. Of course, we have to follow all those regulations and record everything we do.
I guess I was thinking of the wells in the neighbors' water with the.
There might be time at the end. Thank you.
Try to answer.
Are you number 2? I'm trying to prevent the food.
And we can circle back. We just don't know how many people will have questions, okay, Jerry? All right, who's up for number 2?
I am, I guess. I just wondered, how many chickens did you have or do you have, and how many chickens do you plan on having?
Yes. Currently, we have roughly 900,000 laying hens, and we've had as much as 330,000 pullets. A future farm will have 2 million laying hens and roughly 750,000 pullets.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, talking about the water, how many gallons do you intend to use per day of fresh water? And where are you getting the fresh water? Yeah, I know it's from the wells, but yeah.
Yeah, and I apologize, I don't have that exact number. I know what the well capacities are as far as gallons per minute, that kind of thing. They're typically like 200 gallons per minute well, and that's what puts them into the high capacity well class. I can tell you this, that there are separate aquifers. There's close to surface water aquifers, and then there's another substrate of hard pan, and then it goes down, and then there's another lower aquifer. In this part of the state of Wisconsin, if you go down to deeper aquifers at about 500 feet, you actually don't disturb anything that's happening either on domestic wells, say yours, or on surface water.
Okay.
It's just a completely separate aquifer.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is I don't understand your operation there. Is it just a laying operation of chickens, and then you sell the eggs to a distributor, or do you actually kill chickens out there and send them out for processing?
Right, so our business is eggs. We actually don't do any shell egg production, like you wouldn't find our eggs at a grocery store. Right now, all of our eggs is broken, so it's in liquid form, and so our customers would receive it like in a milk tanker, and from there they pasteurize it typically. In the future, we'll do a little bit of shell eggs, but again, you won't find it at a retail grocery.
But you don't kill chickens out there for processing, or?
No, they're not meat birds. I mean, they have an end of flock life where we have to.
So you keep the chickens until they're basically laid out, if you want to call it.
Spent hen.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Number 3. Thank you.
I get a workout here tonight. You want a squirt?
Sure.
Trying to
Flu season, right?
flu.
My name's Chip Roeder. I have a house on Elm Point Road, and this has been a problem as long as I can remember, and I'll admit it's better than it was 3-4 years ago, but there's still been plenty of days since 2016 where you can't be outside, you can't be on the lake, you just close up your house and hope the wind changes. And I've also been hearing about mitigation as long as I can remember, and it's never eliminated the problem, and now to me 3 times as many chickens means 3 times the problems, and we're supposed to believe this time will be different and mitigation is going to work. You got to understand how skeptical I am, and probably a lot of other people.
Good point. When we took over the handling of the manure last December, fortunately there was a large volume that had turned anaerobic. It was sludge. We were doing our best to try and move that off-site as fast as possible. It had virtually no value. It took much longer than we took through most of it. That was disappointing to us, and I by proxy. But since that time, we have really learned better practices since we've been taking back control. We're now turning the manure less than when we first got the compost turn. And employed some of the things that you've seen on the screen there. These are new practices. Again, we have 9 farms across the U.S., and so we have some folks at our other sites that are pretty savvy at this. We've also invited a couple people in the Madison area this full-time too, and they've given us tips of when and how to turn it. So I think some of your perception of improvement is real, and it's going to get better because it's seen we already are employing here in the next couple of weeks some more aids in how we handle manure. But the biggest thing about the future farm is you go from 75% moisture content inside of a manure building, going to have a lot of odor to it, down to roughly 20. It's such a significant drop that, and I, with the age of this current farm, I'm not able to deploy that technology as it's showing up here at all. But the best we can do is continue to improve the practices since we took it over, and we are. And once this is on board, it's a radical change in how manure is dried fast. That's where you're.
Thank you. Now, we know that according to the WPDES wastewater water pollution permit, the farm is allowed to land apply the egg wash wastewater from the Creekwood facility. Could you speak to what fields in and around Lake Mills it's okay to land apply that egg wash wastewater, please?
Yeah, majority of our water is applied to hay. In fact, 100% of it is all hay ground, and it's per cycle of hay crop. And it's applied according to, it's phosphorus based, per the WPDS permit. We primarily spread it, a lot of it, all of it, the northeast of town here. On a farmer has multiple fields which have been approved by the DNR. They've gone through the approval process. The soil samples have been taken, the nutrient levels in which the ground is, the fertility of the ground. So that tells us how much we can apply per crop rotation.
Do we have a five? Do we have a number 5? Okay.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my name is Robert Mertz. I live on the south side of town, and I would kind of echo that the smells have been pretty atrocious there on certain days. My two other questions are, how are the dead chickens, are they manually removed during the process and then taken to be incinerated? And do you anticipate more cadavers with the cage-free method or less cadavers?
Yeah, today we have animal welfare caretakers that inspect the flocks manually every day. And if there happens to be one that passed, they remove it from the cage. And then in this case here, once we get this cremator set up, it will be transported to that cremator, disposed of properly. And it will no longer go into compost like we're doing now.
In regards to cage-free and what's the difference in mortality between cage-free and conventional raised layer hens, when they first came out with cage-free, there was a noticeable difference on when you saw the data. Most of that was because I guess some of the area which they could roam, they were too large, so there was too many birds, if you will, in one area, and so they call it hen pecking order. So birds will always try and reestablish who the boss is, really. So what they've learned from that is to break up the barn in sections so they're not in as larger groups. And since then, they've really noticed a little bit of increase versus conventional, but it's really close. It's the last one I saw, Robert, was roughly 0.5% to 1% mortality. But I've seen some metrics that didn't have any. We chose a cage-free system that we think will really work well with that. So I'm not anticipating anything noticeable.
Does anyone else have a question, or we have a number 6? Okay. Yes.
We'll get you. You want to squirt before you grab the mic there?
Asking a lot about odors, and these are major concerns in the community, I guess. I'm also wondering what kind of noise factors are going to be coming out of the new facility. You're talking incineration, plant turnover, low conveyor, and these kinds of things. What noises are we going to be dealing with?
Barn exhaust fans, but but the fans will be towards the center of the building. What we have today, fans are external. So a lot of that will be muted versus what we have in the barns because of the way those fans are pointed. So that's one thing. If we end up going with the conveyor over the road, we're choosing to do a drag type conveyor, which is noticeably less noisy than the other option that we've seen appear in the industry do. This isn't, and of course, that doesn't run continuous when it calls for feed. I don't have. We have an over the elevated conveyor in our Northwest Iowa farm, and it's. You stood right under it, you could hear it, but I can't give you exact yards. But if I'm on a football field or something, I can't hear it. That's at our farm in Northwest Iowa.
As we go through the selection process, suppliers and contractors, and we're looking at multiple contractors, they all have the same mission and the same scope of work, which would include that conveyor. Once that is selected, we've started a process between our attorney and the town's attorney to draft up agreements for that type of conveyor system. So it would be scrutinized not only by us, making sure that we have decibel levels that are tolerable by everyone, including us, but also by the township, by the township's engineers, and we would make sure it's something that that works well and that doesn't pose any kind of nuisance. Last thing we need is to cure the odor and create noise. So it's a good question, but in the engineering process for that, that will definitely be part of that process. I'm sure that township, who would have to approve that agreement and let us do it, would not let us do it.
2 months out of the year, about the October, November, we still will dry corn. So that drying corn, you will hear the dryer running. And we do have a small overhead conveyor, drag conveyor, that actually runs the entire time we're drying corn. And if they turn the dryer off and then do a clean out, I can be standing down by the plant and I can't hear it run.
Okay. And I'm wondering, actually, this is for my son. The smell, I agree with everybody that it has just been ungodly awful these past couple weeks. I went out last night and I could barely, and my whole truck smells like chicken manure. My clothes, everything. I mean, this is just awful. And my son came to me the other day and says, Mom, you know what, I'm graduating from college. When can I have a graduation party? My response was, I love you, sweetie, but you know what, I can't, because the problem is, unless I ask Daybreak, when can my son have a graduation party? Because I never know when it smells. And I've already had people come to my house, my friends, my family, and actually leave my house. You know how embarrassing that is? And it's very frustrating. Now you're going to build this in my backyard. You know, especially during summertime, when I want to open up my windows for fresh air. You know, you guys have it. We won't. A lot of these people are probably on lockdown. And the lockdown means that we can't even open up our windows to get that fresh air because we smell chicken manure. That's not a good way of living. That's not a good neighbor.
I'm not sure I'm going to give an answer that will appease you, except that to say that that is one of the biggest reasons that we chose, rather than a different farm or a different location, is you go from a 75% moisture content due to the when this farm was built. That's what we moved over to our current manure storage building, and it is odorous, no doubt. And we're not sitting on our hands just ending its business as usual. You've seen, and you'll be seeing some more here in the near future. We're trying to handle today's farm differently, mitigate as much odor as we can given the age that we're dealing with. Beauty of what we're doing here in the future is you literally take it from 75 down to 20 or less. There'll be some months that'll be less than 10%. That's like dried coffee grounds. And that is such a radical reduction of what everybody has known this farm, or really, any larger poultry facility to be like. It's one of the reasons we've chosen to put that type of technology and that type of investment with this farm, because we know that the history of this. So you won't hear an argument from me. I guess what you're trying to hear from me tonight, and why we voluntarily asked, are being accepted to come here, is we are willing to make that investment. We are willing to do it here rather than keep something that's very aged and running. We wanted to address this. And the best way to address it is to destroy the current farm and to build something that is state-of-the-art and new.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we missed someone before. Sorry, number 6.
Yes, Brandy Girl, I'm a resident of Lake Mills, and of course I'm very bothered with the odors as well. But not only with the odors, but of doubling the capacity of the farm, making it into an indeed large CAFO, having that within such a close vicinity of our city. I don't know of just the ethics involved in raising animals in such conditions creates a problem for me as well. And I like all of your solutions that you're coming up with, but to me, if you're doubling the farm capacity, even if you're tearing down the old buildings, that to be drying that much manure every day, they're and saying that the noise level of the dryers will be tolerable. I'm wondering if it's still going to be a constant hum that's going to be prevalent through the city, reminding us every day that there's 2 million chickens being raised in this confined area. And then on top of that, your high-capacity wells, and to reassure us that they're 500 feet down and that this isn't going to be problematic for any domestic wells in the area, still is not satisfying to me in terms of what it could do to the water tables and creeks and wetlands, and ultimately into impacts on the lake. So I understand you're trying, to come up with solutions, but just the amount of chickens in one location like that is very problematic. If you were to continue with the same amount of chickens and then had all of these solutions, maybe there'd be more confidence involved and having less high-capacity wells implemented. But just the enormous operation increase, it really still raises a lot of questions.
Thank you, Brandy. Do you guys want to speak to that, or should we take another question? We could take another question. Okay. Will manure from the Highway O facility, which is the other Daybreak Foods facility located in Dane County, actually, and it's called LMC, or Lake Mills Complex, will that manure be brought to the Creekwood, that's a new one, Creekwood Crossman Road facility for manure drying?
It will not. The reason we wouldn't do that is for bird. We don't, that's kind of a bird biosecurity. Try and mix farms like that.
8? Are we on 8? Yeah. Number 8?
Yeah, good evening. I'm Brian Benesch from County Road S in Lake Mills. And first of all, I've got a few things here. You talk about 9 sites around the country. You guys own 9 sites around the country, and we still have a horrible, horrible problem with this smell. As soon or as late as December, I was out in my yard trimming some trees, and it was so putrid I was going to vomit. Now, you've taken over the system. You've been in business since 1970, is it? When was your chicken farm built? Okay, so it was built in 1959, and this is 2018. You've continued to have complaints, You've blown the people off, and we've done nothing to update that system. Or if you have updated that system, you've gone the wrong way for sure. But now that you're courting us, now that you're dating us, now that you want us to fall in love with you, you're promising we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You talk about, what was the percentage here of drying your manure? You're going from 75% down to 20%. 75 to 20%, so you're dropping approximately 55%. But you're tripling your manure. So although it's drier, we have a much larger quantity of it, so we're still going to have the smell. So first of all, I would recommend to my town board, to the county board, to turn this down until you prove to us what you're going to do with what you have already that will make the recommendations that, yeah, we trust you. You're doing nothing with that. When we run into a problem after the courtship is over, well, hey, this is business. I'm not investing in that. I'm making money. I'm cracking eggs, boy. I'm making money. I'm not worried about that anymore. I got the approval. And the last question that I do have is, what is your investment in the future for 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30 years down the road when all of your technology is now outdated by 30 years? What is the assurance of us people in the town of Lake Mills that live here forever? What's the assurance that you're going to upgrade the systems to continue so that we don't have these odors issues or the noise issues or anything else? Go ahead.
Well, my response is going to be similar to the last one, Brian. The reason that we're doing this, where we're doing it, is because of the asset, or the farm and the age that it is today. And we're really limited on what sort of technology you can put into a barn that's been built in the early 1970s or late 1960s. And we've been pretty transparent tonight. We've been learning, when we took back control of the manure handling and composting, we've learned some things in the last year. That's about how long we've had it. And we did have to deal with a large amount or a large volume of, I call it anaerobic stuff, because it wasn't turned properly prior to us handling it. That was pungent. And we've also got some new equipment that just arrived this Tuesday that we'll be installing in the next couple of weeks. In regards to the new farm and what we do in the future to make sure that is operational, and that if there was new technology to come on board, all that I could tell you is that the equipment that we own today, we maintain today. Whether it's a farm that we have here in Wisconsin or a farm in Ohio or Iowa, when it's our asset, it's in our best interest to make sure that asset runs appropriately. Businesses that don't do that typically don't last very.
I don't understand how you could be caught off guard just taking over this system in December or 6 months ago. If you own 9 facilities around the country, how can the odor still be that horrible if you guys took it over and we're still, is this the only place that you have an odor issue? Or how could you be caught off guard owning 9 facilities and not know how to handle your Lake Mills manure and compost?
Not sure what you mean by caught off guard, but when we took over the manure handling, we did immediately purchase new equipment to handle this, because this is the oldest facility we have, and yes, it's probably one of our oldest facilities we have. Oh, we did, and we're changing the practices of it, so we're doing it better.
Thank you. Was somebody else up on dock yet? Was there a number 9? Okay, sorry, we're obviously kind of, going along here. Okay, well, we did have a couple questions that people had about the incineration process. How many days of the week and what hours will the incinerator most likely be operating? And will the incineration process be used for depopulating the barns when going from cage to cage-free housing?
Answer the last question first. We won't be using it for depopulation. They're just not that big. Handle that. As far as when we do it, it'll be Monday through Friday, and it'll be during the daytime hours. Exactly what the cycle is, we're not sure yet because it hasn't been installed yet. The reason that we went with a 2-stage incinerator versus a 1-stage, we did our homework. We asked a lot of folks in the poultry industry what they've moved to. We spoke to a particular person up in northwestern Wisconsin. He's actually changed out all of his single-stage incinerators to a 2-stage because, and this is what we had heard from some folks in Michigan as well, that you cannot smell any of the exhaust. It's virtually odorless because that second-stage burner is so hot at over 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit. And the ash, there's an ash box with it, and he's converted 11 of his single-stage to a 2-stage because it's that much more effective. That's why we've done that.
Thank you. I know other people have questions, so
we'll just go ahead and if you raise your hand and this thing is sliding down. Okay, Jimmy, would you like to speak? Yeah. Okay.
I just wanted to ask you a question. You got manure, I say, you got manure, this stuff out there, yes, you're going to dry the manure and all that, but you know, running an egg facility, you know, it takes electricity. I know you're using it from the grid, but do you think someday you might convert over and put in new, not solar, but you know, burn the manure for electricity someday. That's what a lot of new dairy farms are doing today. I suppose you'll be doing it too. I mean,
We don't have any plans right now, Jim, on using manure as an alternative fuel. I do know that pork and dairy, because their manure is basically liquid, and they do some large tent digesters, and they use that gas to power their boilers and so forth. Poultry manure just doesn't throw off that type of.
yeah. But it'll probably take you about maybe about 5-10 years to convert, maybe eventually.
If there was a good option, if there was something that made a lot of sense, we'd look at it. But I know a lot of folks in our industry do pelletize the manure. And it's not a bad practice. It can be done really well without virtually any odor, and it does deal with manure rapidly. It's not something we're doing, and it's not something we have any plans on purchasing.
I just want to ask you one thing though. I suppose some of your electricity will be operated by solar panels, though, or.
Not in my plan.
Thank you. Who else has a question? This lady right here, Ronnie? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jane Berg. I'm probably your closest neighbor. My question has to do with the dust. You said that you were having hard surfaced roads at the new farm to reduce the dust. Thank you very much. What is going to become of the current property? I heard you say you were taking down the lane barns, and then what? Because we have a lot of truck traffic, we've got a lot of dust. The gravel driveway is the biggest thorn in my side right now. So if you could address that.
Yeah, we'd prefer it not to be dust for a lot of reasons, Jane. But one of the reasons is dust can carry particulate matter that can be that we don't want into our houses. So we will be hard surfacing the roads around the new layer farm, which in your case would be south and slightly east of you. And then around the pullet manure buildings that you showed, those will also be hard surfaced. And then if we get the approval financially to build a new feed mill, that would move a bit further south, and that too would be hard surfaced. So as far as plans on where the current barns are, those would be destroyed. We may choose to put that into crop, whether it's hay or something that would absorbent. We may grass it over. Part of that has to do with how the permitting and how they view that land, whether it's agriculture or whatever. So we'll make sure that we use it appropriately. But there'll be we have no plans for a structure over those laying. Yeah. Well, once we're all done, the only movement that we'd have would be much. Every now and then you would have a pullet move that would go to the layers, but that only happens just a handful of times a year, maybe 6-7 times. And NFP. I don't. Oh, yeah, the food plant, the pet food plant. That's actually owned by them, the main portion of that.
But there's still going to be corn deliveries there on a daily basis, correct?
Yeah, for the foreseeable future, those bins have their lifespan too. Eventually they'll wear out, and then the new bins, if we can locate the feed mill further south, the new bins will be located at that spot. Yeah. Yeah, but that's something we can, the part that we owned, and make sure if we're going to use that, because we'd like it to all be hard surface.
Thank you very much for your question, Jane. Who else has a question? Chris?
I'm Chris Frost from the Lake Mills Leader, and there's a few things, thank you. There's a few things I want to ask. First, a general question. How many more jobs are going to come from this change and expansion? Let's start there.
Still kind of totaling that up, Chris, because cage-free is different than conventional. It takes roughly two times more labor just because there's more inspection in a cage-free system. So about 2 times as many jobs that are associated with working inside the barns. Hesitant to throw a number out there because it's going to end up in print, but somewhere between 30 and 50 additional is what I'm somewhat comfortable with.
Okay. Second question is, a lot of conversation, and I followed this from, back in December, and I'm new to the area. Okay, so I drove out one day to have a smell, and I was okay with it, but my wife wasn't. Okay. Now, with all that said, you guys say you want to be good neighbors. Would you be adverse to having a government or citizen committee kind of watch and say, hey, this is working well, this is not working well, this stinks, this doesn't work? And if they were to go and tour your facility or just sit there and breathe the air, and come to you and say, hey, what's your commitment to the town of Lake Mills, that if somebody has a legitimate problem, that you'll listen to them and not, as what some people have said, blowing them off?
And one of the things that we've talked about doing is having an annual meeting with the neighbors that live pretty close in, not only to hear kind of what they're experiencing, but also to share some of the things that we're doing. And so there's a lot of things that we do activity-wise that can't view from the road that we consider to be better practices. So yeah, I'm very open to that. In fact, I just had a conversation this week with a lady that lives on Elm Point, and she was not able to make it here along with some of her neighbors. And I said I'd be very, very open if somebody wanted to host me at their home and have their neighbors there, because they're not able to be here tonight, to share with them what our plans are so that they're in the know. And so I'm very open to that. If there's something that is bothering a close-in neighbor, whether it's a light that kind of goes through the wrong window of their house, absolutely, we're very open to that. I think certainly at most of our farms, I know Keith has dealt with this in the past, there's been a specific issue. We've done our best to address specific issues.
Now, with a new farm, obviously, there's probably going to be a lifespan. So with that said, when you look at your annual budget, how much money are you going to be putting in the bank so when something wears out that you can just say, okay, we've got this amount of money set aside so we can get this fixed and make sure that nothing falls apart that would cause a problem down the road?
Yeah, every year we do a budget cycle, Chris, and every year we lay aside a certain percentage that goes towards repairs and maintenance. It doesn't matter which farm that happens at. And so this farm would be no different. And the nice part is that you're dealing with a newer structure with newer ventilation. So obviously, you're dealing with new assets, not something from 1968 that you purchased in 2008.
Right, you'd be able to amortize it over a longer period of time. Last question I really had is just an abstract question. The three of you gentlemen, hearing all the horror stories about being on lockdown and everything like that because of the smell, with the new facility, would you say, yeah, I'd buy a house there?
I would, because I've visited many of these facilities that only had one of these two technologies in it for rapid manure drying, and I was very impressed with what I didn't smell. Very impressed. That included both U.S. facilities and a lot from Europe as well. And we're employing both the manure drying system and the Manure Belt drying system. And yes, they had as many birds as we're proposing that we have on our.
Okay, is there a way to measure the odor on a daily basis, like a meter or some sort? That's my last question.
No,
There is one product that the industry uses and the university systems that do research in this, Iowa State probably being the leader that I can see, Dr. Hongwei Shin. One is from a company that's based out of St. Croix, Minnesota, and it's called the Nasal Ranger. And it does give you more of a metric-based versus a 1 out of 5 rating. Well, you may rank something a 3 and Ronnie might be a 4, but this gives you more of a numerical rating. So we will be purchasing that, not just for the new farm, but for the current farm. So we're going to have a better idea of just how strong an odor is and where it's coming.
So will those readings be available to the public so they can click into a link and say this is what it is today?
We would certainly work with the grassroots group that Anita referred to tonight, Citizens for a Better Environment, and we could share those results.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very encouraged by that because they use that Nasal Ranger equipment. The Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection uses that when they do odor ratings to determine livestock siding applications. So it is considered very good technology. So that's really good news. I'm happy to hear that. Somebody back there had a question again. Yes.
As far as the new buildings, again, I would recommend the town board not to approve it, but it sounds like you guys are too far gone, it's going to be approved. With that said, you said you're going to break ground April of 2018. At what point will the old facility be shut down so we don't, assuming everything you say is accurate, assuming that we're going to live in the best smelling town in the state of Wisconsin, at what point will the other one be shut down so we don't have to deal with that?
Brian, before you leave tonight, I'll look at our master schedule and give you an exact date.
I understand contractors, but
Mike?
I have another question. I mean, Mike, I don't think it's
Yeah.
We're dealing with the current site plan of being on 40 acres. You acquired 80 acres. In the interest of transparency, is there something down the road that hasn't been announced yet, something in your back pocket?
No, Mike, there's not. In the back 40 or the back 38, whatever you want to call it, there'll be the storm runoff water that you have to account for because you have a lot of roof surface. There'll be an area there for that. But as far as structures, there is nothing that we have planned for that at all. And it really kind of came with the property. We didn't want to have somebody else right behind us, so we bought it.
Thank you. Yes.
New employees, 30, 40, whatever you're going to get, minimum wage employees.
Yeah, our starting wage right now is, depending on the job that you have, is between $12 and $12.50. That's the starting wage right now.
Thank you. We did have a submitted question from someone that asked, what happens to the layer chickens when they no longer produce eggs?
Called a spent hen, and a spent hen for the industry kind of has one of two avenues. There's a few businesses that are in operation in the Midwest that use those birds. They take them out of the buildings live, and they get transported live like a broiler, in turkeys, because the turkeys are typically contract grown, and then they're sent live to a slaughter facility. This is no different. That meat is typically used in things like soups and so forth, because it's not a meat bird, so it's not a big bird. But that's one of the avenues. The other avenue is that they do use it, and they dry it down and they emulsify it for fertilizer and some other supplements. I'm not positive, but those are the two avenues that spent hens go towards.
Gentleman back there, or, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses. The lady. I wouldn't know if somebody that I knew well was back there.
I'm Sandy Crossman, and I'm just wondering, will your new facility be buying corn from the local farmers like you're buying corn now? It's a lot of farmers that come in with their corn in the fall that you buy their corn, and a lot of these people don't even know you do that.
Yeah. That's a great question, Sandy, and the answer is yes. We would continue to buy our corn locally. I don't think we go outside of a 30-mile radius with our corn. So with the new farm site, and again, this depends on where corn is at, but we're projecting it'll be a little over a $5 million purchase on corn alone. So it will be expanding and growing as far as just how much corn we buy, and it'll still remain local.
Thank you, Sandy. Another person has a question?
I'm Pam Geib, and I am wondering about antibiotic use on your chickens.
We actually don't use any.
Or anything like antibiotics?
No.
Nothing.
Thank you. Was there another question back there? Probably should put my glasses on so I can see. I wanted to just clarify because I wasn't sure if I understood. So the incinerator does not, it is not large enough to handle large-scale mortality? Like, is that what I was understanding? Or okay, so if there was another avian outbreak there would not be incineration of the animal. Okay, all right, thank you. That was a question that several people had. Thank you. Anyone else? Chris, you have a question?
I'm not sure what the noise difference is.
I'm just curious if it's going to be really, really loud during construction. That'll have a start and end point.
And we won't, the question is the noise level during construction. And it's not the type of facilities where you pile driving and things like that. Find it are skyscrapers or for bridges. So, they're, like Bobby just said, these are actually all steel built. So when we're talking about asset length, right now we have wood buildings, a substrate of concrete that's getting old and tired, and these are being engineered for long-term assets. That means that the type of construction that's used actually is quite a bit quieter. Buildings kind of like bolt together with insulated panels. So there'll be no wood in the.
Yes, sir.
My name is Jim Schmeiser from Lake Mills. I've got a question. You had mentioned you have visited several facilities within the Midwest. I've had the opportunity the last couple of years. I drive semi for a living. Had to go to Stewart, Iowa. I don't know if you're familiar with that area. It's on I-80. Anyways, a large chicken farm. It was a shell egg farm. And when I found out I had to go to haul eggs out of there, I wasn't happy based on my previous experience with Creekwood. However, when I got there, there was no smell. And I just wondered if that was a facility, it's probably one of your competitors, wondering if they had some of this manure mitigation equipment in place. I've been back there several times to at least 3 of their farms, and I didn't smell anything. And I just wondered if that was some of the technology that was in place in central Iowa that you may have visited.
Is that on the north side of Interstate 80?
Correct.
Yeah, without knowing the exact company, I couldn't give you an exact answer. All that I can tell you is the facilities that I've visited, Jim, had either a manure belt dryer or a manure drying system. That's one of the reasons I went on those tours, whether it's in the U.S. or Europe. First, it was to see if, does it work? Yes. And then there's multiple vendors to choose from, and which one did I want to do business with? And I believe, I've lost count a little bit, but I was over 38 visits to different farms. So I can't speak directly to that one. All right.
Thought I saw a hand up back there. No? Okay. One of the people who was not able to be, I'm sorry. Oh, there was. I'm sorry. Yes.
generating that much water each well, why do you need that many?
Why do we need that many wells?
Yeah, did you say you needed 4 and then 2? Is that?
Right.
Okay.
Well-
So 6 wells, high capacity wells.
Actually, 4 wells are being positioned for the lane side and 3 for the bullet side. Part of the reason for the wells is duplicity. If a well pump were to go down, we would never want the birds to go without water. So, in your home, you can maybe live with that. You can grab bottled water and find a way to get through a few days. If you've got a lot of birds or any large population of animals, you're going to need backup. So part of that is just the sense of having backup. These water systems will be similar, kind of like to a small community system, where all the wells will tie into a central line, go into a central building. That water will then be kept under a certain pressure. It will tie into our fire prevention and all of our fire hydrant systems around the farm. I've actually met with the Lake Mills Fire Chief. We've gone over and we've laid out where we would like all the fire hydrants for the facility. So that's a big part of that is just making sure that we never run out. There are some facilities, by the way, that do put in like a water tower, just a large water tower. We'd rather not do that. Probably something that no one would like to see out in their backyard any more than we would. So the way you overcome that is with redundancy in your
Thank you. And Damon, you have a question?
Yeah, just real quick. Mentioning the bird flu outbreak that we had a year or 2 ago, if that affected one of your flocks, you've got 10 flocks, if that happened to hit one of your flocks, would you end up losing all 10?
Yes, that's the government rule, is that if it affects a farm, the whole farm has to be euthanized. Yeah, doesn't matter how large the farm is. That includes backyard flocks, too.
Do you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there any way, like you're talking about this manure smell, have you guys ever come up with some kind of a spray that you could spray over the area to mitigate some of that smell, instead of doing it the other ways you're doing it?
Yeah, good question. We actually, last Friday, we had a vendor in there named Solinus, and they do a lot of work with the paper industry. They do mostly work, they have 2 types of products. One is a perfumer. I don't think we want to do that because I've smelt that before on industrial sites, and it's never orange smelling. It's always some kind of a hybrid. The other one is more of an encapsulating spray, but they had to be transparent with me in saying they've never done that really with air emissions. They've done that more through water, so like other types of avenues. So they were scratching their heads a little bit how they could apply their product to our system. But we did have them on site last Friday, and they are following back up with us to see is there something they could do even for a test. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mike.
It's been, this last week has been, and I understand, the new facility is supposed to be an improvement and such, but the last week's been a special treat. Last night in particular, I talked to an individual that was up by I-94, and they could smell it all the way up there last evening. So you're telling us that you're implementing best practices and that you're doing these different things, and it sounds like you're trying to do different things, but can you explain to us what it has been over the last, 7 days, in particular the last 24 hours that has been, you couldn't even step outside your front door last night, much less go into downtown.
So Bobby explained earlier when we took over in December, we were plump full. Okay, so as we were moving that out, we didn't have room to work some of the product that was coming in. So that stuff went anaerobic in a bad way. We're trying to get it with the help of wood shavings, and that's what was happening the last few days. We're working in wood shavings to get that to a viable state that we're going to try and stack it. And recently we actually just potentially have a source to get rid of it sooner than not have to work it, so we can eliminate it. And as the fresh stuff that's been coming in, we've been working in the wood shavings and whatnot, and using those better practices. This volume of other stuff that was sitting there that's causing some of the smell is a problem. That's
But that process that you're doing isn't working. It's not relieving anything. It's actually making things far worse.
because it was so wet, and then it sat there for that time frame of having enough room to do anything in it. That's what caused the problem.
So what do we do now then tomorrow? What do we do this coming weekend? I'd like to go work in my woods a little bit, take care of some trees. I'm afraid I need a gas mask.
We're not going to work it. We're going to leave it. And obviously when we work it, it upsets it. It releases more odor. So the only time that we're going to release any more odor is when we go to haul it. And it'll be short-lived because it's not going to be in that building. It'll be gone.
Could I just follow up with one question? Is that the manure you're talking about the farthest from the road that's piled up pretty high now? Are we talking about that manure you
Nope.
can see? Well, what's
Nope.
going on with that? Because that's getting pretty high.
Yep, that's part of the process. We're stockpiling that. That'll be broke down and ready to haul this spring.
Okay, all right. Ronnie, you had a question?
Yeah. Yes, I have a question. In 2015, we were hit with the H5N2. Do you have like a special plan? Should we be hit with H5N6 or H7N9, which is communicable to humans? Do you have an emergency plan in place? And how will that differ from when you were hit with H5N2?
Ronnie, our response to that is almost solely dictated by the USDA. So how we remove birds, how we handle mortality during an incident like that, and again, no matter the farm size. So whether it was one of the strains that you referred to or a strain that had come in 2015, they're the ones that dictate, what our response has to be. There's really no wiggle room in it.
Just a comeback to that, I'm a wee bit concerned because those two strains are communicable to humans. Now, right now, it's not human to human so much, but it can travel, H7 and 9 can travel through the air. How fast do you shut down your wastewater spreading? And I'm just wondering how closely this is being investigated, and the reason I'm wondering that is because we were supposed to have H7N9 in our influenza shots this year, but the strain mutated and it didn't pan out. So truly the CDC does see this as a public health threat, and I'm hoping you guys are kind of following that. And I get you guys are going to have a terrible loss with all your chickens, but I'm kind of worried about all the folks that live around and are breathing air that might get out, especially if it happens to be a strain we don't have a vaccine to.
Any reported incidents in Europe, Canada, and the United States and Mexico, all of them are quickly typed so they understand what strain it is. And I know you're not alone in that, whether it's talking the major protein has something that they are concerned about. Southeast Asia had their concern realized at some point. And I know that every time there is a incident that's reported, unfortunately the ones that are reporting are only the larger farms. Smaller ones are not mandated to do that. But that they're quickly typed, and then a response is dictated to that specific.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone else have a question before I read a submitted one? Okay. This is a question someone who was not able to be here asked. Chemicals must be used as cleaning agents at the facility to prevent the spread of infection and foodborne illness. How is it possible to grow the good bacteria for the biodigester if chemicals are in the wash water or the wastewater?
I'm just going to comment based on our history with getting the digester to work, because when we put that digester in for our wash water, for all of our egg wash water, we had issues with it. One, the cold bears problems with slowing down the good bugs. point of killing them. And many of you that lived here back in 2009, you all knew it, because it stunk. It smelled like sewer when we hauled it out to the field, and we worked diligently on trying to figure out just that exact same thing. We had it re-engineered a little bit, and we went through and worked with our egg wash suppliers, our cleaning suppliers for our equipment in the plant. Obviously, we're producing food, and we want to, it has to be clean to food safe conditions, and we want to do that. So we did a lot of days of testing, upstream, downstream, and we come up with some different products to use within the process of us washing and sanitizing our equipment. And we did eliminate a couple.
Thank you. Is anyone else thinking of a question they would like to pose at this point? Well, we know that there are similarities between the Daybreak Creekwood facility and the Cold Spring Egg Farm in Palmyra, and they do have an air permit. So we're wondering if you've picked an air engineer yet to help you with the DNR air permit process, and whether you've started on an air application yet.
Yes and yes. We have engaged with an engineering firm that's working with our site engineering firm. There's steps to that process. The first step is to determine whether or not we need an air quality permit. That's based on basically the different emission points around the facility. So the process right now is we identify all of those sites. We determine how much each site emits, what it emits, how it generates that. And then that goes through the step with the DNR to determine, okay, from that, they could say, yes, you are required to have a permit, no, or maybe there might be certain points that. And so as we work through that process, we're working directly with the DNR, and we'll have that, basically in place before we would start any operation.
Thank you, because that's really important to us. We were told by the air engineer that did the analysis of the air permit that was in place for Unlimited Renewables LLC that really probably was not the right type of air permit. And so we don't want to repeat that again, that there would already be construction, and therefore then instead of having the appropriate construction permit, there would be a quickie permit, and then we have problems, because that definitely went on for many years. So we're going to make sure that you guys do this come heck or high water. I'm really serious, respectfully speaking, because that's really important to us. We want that air to be well controlled. We don't have a choice in terms of whether we breathe, breathe in air. So thank you for following that procedure in the appropriate fashion. We appreciate it. Yes, would you like to ask a question?
Well, I'll say one thing about the city of Lake Mills. We are known as legendary Lake Mills, and we do not want to become legendary because of the chicken manure odor.
Kind of to adjoin that comment, when we were the rapid moisture mitigating technology that I showed tonight, I had many comments back to me from the vendor community is, if you're not making pellets, why are you investing in this? It's not necessary. And I said the reason why is because it's the right thing to do, and we have a chance to do it right the first time, and this is what we're going to do. And so I heard that more than a few times, and I also heard, why are you doing both? Why are you doing a manure belt dryer, and why are you doing a manure belt drying system? A little bit like the water comment, part of it's redundancy. I want to make sure that we do the right thing the first time, and we actually oversized it a little bit. So they build these systems, a manure drying system, based on the number of birds you have in a house. We actually put in an additional tier just to make sure that we are more than what they had specified. So we agree with you. We want it to be known for something other than our farm.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I think what we'll do next, because we do have another speaker, and then after that, if people have a few more questions, since it's still relatively early, we'll entertain some more questions. But the next speaker is a town resident who lives within a half a mile, is that correct, Tony? From the Creekwood Farm, Tony Beard, and he'll talk about some of his perspectives. Tony?
Well, I think that's good enough. Okay. First and foremost, you're all probably wondering, who the heck is this guy? And I've only lived here about a year, a little more than a year, but I've experienced the chicken farm situation on a very close basis. I thought I was the closest neighbor, maybe you are. All right, okay, I don't want to steal that glory from you. Anyway, my wife and I moved here to Lake Mills from a fair distance away because in touring around and visiting relatives and friends and wandering around the country, we fell in love with Lake Mills. Lake Mills is a beautiful, beautiful place. People are nice, you know. I don't have to worry about, somebody spraying some epitaph on my garage or something, and this is a good town, and these are good people, and so it attracted us from a long ways away. And so then I asked myself, if this town, these people that live in this town, I wish I was from this town, I'm from a big city, but you all know each other, and you're all interrelated through work and all that. And so I find that with this chicken farm problem that's been going on for a long time, even before they owned it, that people have kind of gotten into a situation where they're kind of mad at each other instead of at the problem. And what I mean by that is there are people that are, like Sandy Crossman was saying, they sell their feed to the chicken farm, and there's people out there that, their only livelihood is leasing out their property to somebody to farm it in order to sell their feed to the chicken farm, and then, they don't want that sacrificed, and that's a big deal, And so what I've found through, I moved here, I found that the chicken farm was a problem for me. I started doing research, and I realized that the only way to attack this problem is by looking at all the angles, by everybody working together. And so in that, I decided to talk to all different people from all different perspectives about this situation. I talked to Bobby a lot, and I talked to Keith, and Anita and I have spoken. I'm not associated as with Daybreak or with the organization that Anita is associated with. I'm just a Lone Ranger. And so here's what I came up with. First of all, the main problem that people have with Daybreak is the odor. That's the number one issue, really. And so if you imagine a place where there wasn't that odor, we probably wouldn't even be having this meeting in reality, And so that, of course, is my main goal. And I think that what I did, first of all, is I said, okay, what is this odor? What's happening? What causes it? What doesn't cause it? And those sort of things. What's in it? And I didn't really get any good information on that from people, so I went looking myself. And there's an article in the Wisconsin Agriculturalist from this month that says, never assume no risk when agitating manure. And it talks about what the University of Wisconsin Extension put out a brand new bulletin on exactly what happens when you agitate manure, what's released, how to control it, things like that. And so I was able to get this document, and it says in here that there's a lot of things that are released when you agitate and compost manure. But the most common, I think we've got some feedback. The most common are carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen sulfide. Now, carbon dioxide and methane, those gases predominantly displace oxygen. That's their main function. And so as far as them being harmful to people, carbon dioxide is not harmful to people. We have a lot of that in our atmosphere. Methane, we all know that's a gas, that's flammable, but it's not necessarily harmful to people. So as a result, there's not really a level to say this is what people shouldn't be exposed to. But I mean, if you're going to breathe just methane, you're not going to live, obviously. But it's not as volatile as ammonia and hydrogen sulfide. And those two particulars have, there's this whole brochure, and I can give people links to it if they want. It talks about what happens to you at different exposure levels, from the moment you can smell it until you're dead, and all those steps in between. And so that was my first introduction into what actually is being emitted from manure. However, there's also the factor of the mortality of the birds currently being turned into that manure and then them being composted as well. So that is also off-gassing, cadaver gases. And I think one town resident said that can be classified as putrescine, which is also a toxic vapor to people. So when I look at this, on the one hand, there's this odor, and that's irritating. And, oh man, that smells bad. And is there a possibility that there's some harmful elements in that? And what's the long-term exposure of that? There are studies out there that have linked higher rates of cancer to living in close proximity to large chicken farms. However, the employees at the large chicken farms are not all coming down with cancer. So, I'm sure there's a lot of different factors there. In all honesty and fairness, we have to look at that objectively. So what I'm trying to say with this is that I think there's a lot of motivation to eliminate this problem. There's, this gentleman over here was talking about how he didn't want legendary Lake Mills to be legendary for a chicken farm odor. And, I wouldn't want that either. I want to live in Lake Mills. I want to stay here for a long time. And so, my understanding, talking to the people from Daybreak, is that they're making that effort, And, over the course of me talking to them, they got a new agitator, and they tried that. And then they're working on getting the incinerator and actually implementing that prior to the construction of the new building. And I will say, living as close as I am to the facility compared to when I first moved in, because I only have a 1-year kind of window to look at, that from the time I moved in until now, the odors have been less frequent, but not less powerful. And that's, and then after kind of looking at that for, like trying to identify those odors and use that 1 to 5 scale, I kind of determined that there was actually 3 separate odors. And one of those odors smells just like, chicken manure. And the other one, one of the other ones smells kind of like like decaying flesh, but like burnt decaying flesh or something. And then there's just this rotten smell, like rotten vegetables or something like that, And so my assumption, and it's an assumption, is that, there's a chicken manure odor, there's the mortality odor, and then I'm still kind of wondering about the wastewater ponds there, and the digesters and how that's working, and whether or not there's a way to check that. And there was a bladder system being used before that we talked about that is not being used anymore in order to burn off some of the methane that was collected, and the pond was covered, but it's not now, or a portion of it is. I'm not getting really good, solid information on that. And their expansion, one of the things they're doing, which concerns me, is they're making their new wastewater pond 3 times as big as it is right now. And so there's a concern that water is actually going to be prevented from entering into the groundwater, and that odors from that are being eliminated. Now, the digesters, there was a problem before, and it was really bad, and then that was fixed. And so now, the idea is there like a baseline odor? Like somebody said, I don't know if it was you, Keith, or Bobby, that it smells kind of like a bog or a wetland or something like that. But that's not really the smell that I'm getting. It's more like a rotten smell, you know. And so I'm not sure, you know, and when we drive by the wastewater pond itself, it's more prevalent there than it is around the side where you smell a different odor. So I am personally really concerned about the expansion of the wastewater ponds and how that's going to affect the situation, because I feel like there's an odor component that's not really being addressed there. Or, you know, maybe it's felt that it's been addressed and that it's the lesser of the evils, or I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like that is a big question. And so out of those three odors, if they put the chickens in the incinerator, then that's the putrid dead smell. If they're drying the manure in-house and then storing it in the storage facility behind the chicken farm, then that should technically nearly eliminate that. So the only thing that would feasibly be out in the open is these wastewater ponds. So that, you know, to me, that's still an unknown. That's still an if. Also, you know, earlier when I heard that you're stockpiling manure, I had a question about that in general, and that was that when Daybreak ended their contract with unlimited renewals, there was an overabundance of manure that was still being handled, right? And I've heard a couple of times from you, Keith, about the way that you're handling it, and the story I've heard from you on, like, I think 3 occasions, this is the 3rd one, is that we're trying to catch up. We had some that we couldn't deal with, and then, you know, so now we're going to deal with that one, and that doesn't really make sense to me, because it seems like if you have a way of disposing of it, then you would, like a backup plan, you know, that, like I was asking Bobby, you know, about when, back in the 80s when there was a lawsuit brought by the town's residents against the chicken farm, and it was about the odor, but the lawsuit didn't actually address the odor. It addressed what to do about it, and the answer was that they increased the amount of acreage that they could spread on. So they proved they had 1,600 acres to spread manure on, and that was considered enough by law to deal with the manure problem. So now we're at the situation where we're at the chicken farm that is in function right now, the Creekwood Farm, not the new facility, and there's this constant stockpiling of manure because you can't seem to deal with it in a timely manner because you're always behind because of what you got left with from unlimited renewals. That's kind of the supposition. So why isn't this stuff being loaded up and spread on this acreage that's supposed to be available as a backup plan in order to eliminate stockpiling of manure, so that there isn't even the need for, you know, trying to catch up? You know, you start with a clean slate, you truck it all off, and then you start with a clean slate and you do it right. You know, the thing about composting manure is the temperatures in there, and, you know, the amount of heat, and, you know, and all that stuff. There's a fine line between composting and rotting, right? And so you really need to really be able to maintain control of that. And if you're stockpiling something and not really dealing with it, and it's getting away from you, then when you do deal with it, it's going to be a problem. It's going to cause these huge putrid odors throughout Lake Mills that we're talking about. And being, you know, in a situation where you want to prove that you're really making an effort, why wouldn't you just get rid of that stuff? Why wouldn't you just spread it or ship it out? Or, you know, I mean, you know, what, I'm not really clear on that. So that's, you know, that's another question. All right. Somebody said something about having 9 facilities around the country. I think it was a gentleman back there. And my research has shown that this is actually like a nationwide issue. Just the act of raising a lot of chickens is a problem. it creates odors and stuff like that. You're not going to completely eliminate odors. You're going to do a good job of, keeping them under control. And, in all honesty, the fact that the manure is actually outside and being agitated and there's no kind of filters or dryers or anything, considering the amount of birds you have right now, I think that the odor has actually been somewhat under control. I feel like the effort is being made, and I think that effort has shown, that like I say, the overall, it was like, I don't know, a month, 3 weeks ago, I walked out the door and I actually was like, I can't even remember the last time, what was the day that I actually smelled something from the chicken farm, because it had been such a long frequency. It had been weeks, So, thank you for that, So, I see the effort there. I do. And, these questions I'm bringing up are just, I don't understand those particular parts of it, and I feel like there's something that could be done. Drying is not the same as composting. Is that correct? So if you dry the manure, you still have to compost it? And that's, well, we don't have that thing up there, but in the back, that storage shed is where the composting takes place. And the composting is anaerobic. Okay. I have some literature here on it. Actually breaks down what happens during composting, and it off-gases things, And so that shed has just that screen and that electrostatic filter to filter out dust, but the actual composting that's taking place there, if you're, and instead of just storing dried manure chips, you are composting, and so then there's some sort of gas that might not be caught by this that could be emitted through that screen. Is that right? Okay. But you're confident in the ability of that screen to handle that problem? Okay. And the dust particulates are what odors cling to, right? Okay. So then, for me, I look at it and I say, everybody has the right to live a good life, to breathe clean air, to have clean water, to farm, to plant crops, to grow chickens, And there's a good middle ground here that we can all come to, and I feel like that one of the ways that I feel like we can get there is that we could have a solid contact line to you folks, because I know, even though I've had conversations and stuff with Daybreak and stuff in the past, there are times when I don't have, if I'm calling about, hey, there's an odor line, and you call and you leave a message, but you don't really know if somebody read it or not, or, you don't have a line of communication, And so I feel like having some sort of line of communication with the community is really important, because then it benefits you, because you can actually address problems right on the spot and answer questions right on the spot, so you don't give people a chance to stew and then, they get mad, And, what you mentioned about the joint committee, I felt like that, I've kind of wanted to push that for a while, is that if there was a town and city joint committee that, people would sit on that had representatives from Daybreak that, you said like an annual meeting. I feel like, that like a monthly gathering of these people in order to address, what everybody's feeling, and then publish that would be great, because then, a lot of people are coming here and they're not really hearing on a daily basis what kind of efforts you're making. And so they don't know, and so they assume you aren't making any. And so that's a problem. The other thing is, somebody mentioned, I think it was this gal, that the non-development of the old site. I've heard that site is not going to be developed, it's going to be grassed over. There's a lot of people that are saying that, okay, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, you guys move to some other facility or some other state, and then boom, some new guy, oh, I don't know, I didn't hear that part, and then they're developing. I mean, there's some sort of promissory kind of situation that people are looking for to make sure that you are actually not going to develop on that site, and you're going to remain with what you're proposing. So that we don't revisit this situation 10, 15 years from now again.
Part of it is a variance setback, so if you want to build a barn with live agriculture in there, you could not do that close to the. Those rules didn't exist when they built this.
Okay. All right. And I think, in conclusion for me, there's a lot of things that I am more concerned about than the average town or city of Lake Mills citizen, and that is, the amount of traffic that's going to be flowing during construction, and the amount of traffic that takes up your daily operations, and then that amount of traffic once the operation, as far as the construction is complete and operation is normal. That's a considerable more, larger amount of traffic. And, as I stated to you a while back, every truck that comes down to turn on Crossman, they all lay on their jake brakes, and it's just adding insult to injury, and you get a bunch of them going in there, I mean, it's a concern, I mean, it's a concern for the quality of life and how that's going to be dealt with. And I feel like you answered a lot of good questions tonight, and I appreciate you guys coming here. And I feel like that there are some things that we all can do in order to make this work, And that's all I have to say. I mean, I know I'm a new guy, but.
Thank you, Tony. Before we close tonight, I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. Next Tuesday, February 13th, the town board most likely will be making a decision about the conditional use permit. The town board meeting will take place at 8 o'clock at the town hall across from Topol's. It sounds like within the next 60 days or possibly 90 days, the DNR will be holding a public hearing here in Lake Mills on the wastewater water pollution permit. So that's an opportunity for people to attend, publicly speak, and submit comments. It's also possible that next month, and that's listed on the bottom of your agenda sheet for tonight, it's possible that next month, on Thursday, March 15th, that the zoning committee for the county will be hearing the livestock siting application for the farm. That's not 100% sure, but it's very possible, so you'll be wanting to watch that. In closing, I wanted to thank everyone for coming. If you have not filled out your information sheet, please do so, because we would like to keep you updated with information, and we promise that we will keep your information private and secure from, distributing it to anyone else. So does anyone have any comment or closing question before we close for tonight? No. Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for being here and speaking. We appreciate it. Good night.